You ever wake up, sip your coffee, and think, what fresh hell will today bring? No? Just me? Well, let me tell you about the day my farmland became a racetrack for the entitled HOA elite. I'm Charlie, proud owner of a 40-acre farm smack dab in the middle of what used to be the countryside. Over the years, suburbia encroached like an invasive species. Cul-de-sacs sprouted where cornfields used to be, and SUVs replaced tractors. I held my ground, though. My farm's been in my family for 3 generations, and I wasn't about to let a gaggle of nosy neighbors in pastel polos intimidate me into selling. Last week, I had to leave town for a few days to visit my sister. When I got back late Sunday night, the farm seemed fine. It was too dark to notice anything unusual, so I parked the truck and went straight to bed. But when I woke up the next morning and stepped outside with my coffee, I nearly dropped my mug. There it was, a ribbon of fresh asphalt slicing through my south pasture. At first I thought I was imagining things. But no, there it was, a shiny new 2-lane road, complete with painted lines and a stop sign, cutting through my land like a bad haircut. I nearly choked on my coffee. Who the hell builds a road without asking the landowner? I stormed into the HOA office that afternoon, determined to find out who was responsible for this little infrastructure project. It was a beige building that smelled like printer ink and disappointment. Behind the counter sat Karen, the HOA president, whose entire personality revolved around her clipboard. Charlie, she chirped, flashing me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. What can I do for you today? You can explain why there's a road on my land, I said, crossing my arms. Her smile faltered. Oh, isn't it lovely? It's part of the new Community Beautification Initiative. Beautification? Karen, it's a road. Well, yes, she admitted, flipping through her clipboard as if it held the secrets of the universe. But it provides easier access to the new subdivision. It's for the greater good. The greater good? Are you kidding me? That road cuts through my pasture. My cows don't need a scenic route. The board voted on it, she said with a shrug. It was unanimous. I didn't vote on it, I shot back. And you can't just pave over private property without permission. Karen sighed, the way a kindergarten teacher might when explaining that crayons aren't edible. Oh, Charlie, it's not private anymore. The HOA annexed that portion of your land last month. Annexed? My blood boiled. You can't annex land you don't own. She waved her clipboard like it was some sort of holy relic. It's all in the bylaws. You should have read the letter we sent. Oh, I'd read their letters. A never-ending stream of notices about lawn maintenance and fence heights. But annexing land? That wasn't in any of their passive-aggressive memos. Karen, you're gonna rip up that road and restore my pasture. Or so help me. You'll what? She interrupted, her smile returning with a smug twist. The road's already there, Charlie. Removing it would disrupt the community. You don't want to be the bad neighbor, do you? I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might shatter. This isn't over. As I stomped out, I heard her say to someone in the back, he'll come around. They always do. Oh, Karen, you have no idea who you're dealing with. That evening, I stood by the road, surveying the damage. My pasture was split in two, the fencing torn down, and tire tracks marred the grass. The cows watched me expectantly, probably wondering if the asphalt was edible. It's not, Daisy. I checked. Karen thought she'd steamroll me, literally and figuratively. But if the HOA wanted a fight, they'd get one. I grabbed my notebook and started jotting down everything I'd need. Legal advice, property records, and maybe a really big tractor. This wasn't just about the road. It was about standing up to a system that thought it could bulldoze over the little guy. And as far as I was concerned, Karen and her clipboard army had just declared war. The next morning I called my lawyer Tom and made an appointment. Tom's the kind of guy who looks like he's been ready to sue someone since kindergarten. His office smells like stale coffee and righteous indignation. Perfect for my current mood. Charlie, he greeted me, motioning to a chair across from his desk. What's going on? I dropped a stack of photos and documents on his desk. The HOA built a road through my land without permission. They're claiming they annexed it. Tom's eyebrows shot up. Annexed? That's not a thing HOAs can just do. Tell that to Karen, I muttered. He flipped through the photos, his frown deepening. Okay, first things first. We need to see the deed and your property lines. If they're claiming this land belongs to them now, they'll have to prove it. Luckily, I'd already dug out the deed and the latest property survey. I handed them over, and Tom nodded approvingly. Good. I'll start drafting a cease and desist. In the meantime, don't touch the road. Let's keep this above board. Fine, I agreed, though my tractor keys were practically burning a hole in my pocket. But what if they keep using it? Tom smirked. Then we document everything. Photos, videos, witnesses. The more evidence we have, the better. As I left his office, I felt a little better. Not a lot, but enough to start thinking clearly. Karen might have her clipboard, but I had the law on my side. Now it was time to dig into the HOA's activities and see just how far down this rabbit hole went. Over the next few days, I became a one-man investigative team. I pored over meeting minutes, financial statements, and newsletters. It didn't take long to find discrepancies. Missing funds, vague project descriptions, and inflated budgets. The road was just the tip of the iceberg. I also started talking to my neighbors, and it turned out I wasn't the only one with grievances. One couple had been fined for planting tulips instead of approved HOA flowers. Another family had their mailbox replaced without consent and were charged for it. The more stories I heard, the more it became clear. Karen and her cronies were running the HOA like a dictatorship. By the end of the week, I had a binder full of evidence and a growing list of allies. The HOA might have been powerful, but they weren't invincible. And if Karen thought she could scare me off with her bylaws and bureaucracy, she was about to learn otherwise. By Saturday morning, I was done playing nice. Karen might have her clipboard and a self-righteous sense of authority, but I had a truckload of farm equipment and zero patience for her nonsense. It was time to send a message. The first step? Blocking that road. I parked my old tractor across both lanes, slapped a big red sign on it that read private property. No trespassing, and surrounded the whole thing with bales of hay. It wasn't exactly subtle, but subtlety wasn't going to cut it. The cows seemed to approve, at least. They lined up at the fence, chewing cud and watching the spectacle like it was the best entertainment they'd had all week. The neighborhood wasn't quite as enthusiastic. By noon, a small crowd of HOA loyalists had gathered, led, of course, by Karen herself. She marched up to my blockade with the fury of someone whose Pilates class had been canceled. Charlie, she barked, pointing at the tractor like it had personally insulted her. What is the meaning of this? Meaning? I said, leaning casually against a hay bale. It means you're trespassing. This road is public infrastructure. She snapped. You're obstructing community access. No, Karen. This road is illegally built on private property. My property. And I'm done letting you and your HOA buddies trample all over it. She crossed her arms, glaring at me. This is going to reflect poorly on you when the board reviews your compliance history. I almost laughed. You mean the same board that paved a road without my consent? Yeah. I'm shaking in my boots. Karen's clipboard made its usual dramatic appearance. You're violating the HOA bylaws. Section 8.3 clearly states. Let me stop you right there, I interrupted. This land isn't under your jurisdiction, bylaws or not. And if you think otherwise, feel free to explain it to my lawyer. Her smug expression faltered for a split second. I took a small amount of joy in that. This isn't over, she said finally, spinning on her heel and marching back to her minions. They scattered like pigeons as she barked orders, presumably to draft more threatening letters. Good luck with that, Karen. Blocking the road was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I ramped up my efforts, documenting every interaction and every attempt the HOA made to access the road. I even installed a couple of motion-activated cameras to catch their late-night trespassing attempts, because yes, they tried. Meanwhile, word of the road and my blockade spread like wildfire. Local news picked up the story, framing it as a classic David versus Goliath tale. One farmer standing up to an overreaching HOA. Neighbors started showing up to offer their support, some even bringing baked goods and coffee to fuel the fight. My favorite was Mrs. Whitaker. an elderly widow who showed up with a plate of brownies and declared, "I've been waiting for someone to put Karen in her place for years." By the end of the week, it felt less like a fight and more like a movement. Karen and her clipboard brigade were starting to look awfully nervous. By the time we hit week 3 of Charlie versus Karen, the battle had shifted into a higher gear. Karen, in a predictable show of bravado, had finally escalated matters by filing a lawsuit against me for obstruction of a community resource. Of course, I expected this. Karen never was one to back down without a fight. Tom, my lawyer, was thrilled. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, grinning over his coffee as we reviewed the HOA's claims. "Their argument is full of holes." "Yeah, but we still have to prove it," I replied, flipping through my growing stack of evidence. "You think they'll try to pull any surprises?" "With Karen?" "Always," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "But don't worry, we've got them cornered. You have your witnesses ready?" I nodded. My neighbors had been eager to help. Several were ready to testify about their own experiences with HOA overreach. One even had a story about Karen threatening to fine them for their front door color. Unapproved beige, apparently. The hearing was everything I'd expected it to be. Karen, armed with her clipboard and an air of smug superiority, strutting into the courtroom like she owned the place. She'd hired a lawyer who looked just as insufferable as she was. But Tom wasn't fazed. Karen's argument boiled down to the same nonsense she'd been spouting all along. The road was essential for the community, and my blockade was a menace to public safety. When she called it a duty to the greater good, I thought Tom might burst out laughing. Our turn was much more compelling. Tom presented the property survey, proving the road cut through private land. Then he showed something even more interesting. We were able to get some financial documents of the condominiums, showing the shadow costs associated with the construction of the road. And when we introduced photos of Karen's late-night trespassing attempts, the judge's eyebrows practically hit the ceiling. The best part? My neighbors. One by one, they took the stand and shared their stories. Each one painted a damning picture of an HOA drunk on power, with Karen as the ringleader. By the time Mrs. Whitaker finished recounting how Karen once tried to fine her for putting up Christmas lights too early, even the judge looked annoyed. In the end, the verdict was clear. The road was illegal. The HOA had overstepped, and Karen's annexation was a blatant violation of property rights. The judge ordered the road removed and fined the HOA for damages. Karen's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. Somewhere between lobster and stop sign, the fallout was swift. With the HOA's corruption exposed, Karen was forced to resign. The new board promised to make amends, starting with an apology and a commitment to transparency. As for the road, it took a few weeks, but the asphalt was finally ripped up and my pasture restored. The cows were thrilled. Standing in my field, watching the last of the construction equipment drive away, I couldn't help but smile. Karen and her clipboard were gone, the HOA was on a leash, and my farm was mine again. Mrs. Whitaker's brownies never tasted so sweet. This wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for every neighbor who'd ever been bullied by an overzealous HOA. And if they ever try something like this again, well, let's just say I've got a tractor, a stack of legal documents, and a whole lot of free time.